Rome Day 2 did not start off as planned. I can't believe we missed the first tour time that we were supposed to be on. Rome Day 2 started off at 8:30 a.m. and I am going to let Mrs. Tips for Cruisers explain exactly what happened and why we didn't make that first tour.
There was a lot of traffic everywhere, so I don't know that we would have gotten there any quicker, but it was fine. It wasn't bad. What delayed us so bad was after we actually got to Vatican City, what happened when we tried to get inside.
Wait a minute, does this go against our first rule that you should have a ticket with a barcode? Especially after being at the Coliseum yesterday and seeing people struggle with this. They had an email, but no ticket. You actually have to go to the guide in order to get the piece of paper or the ticket with a barcode. Now, we even asked people for directions, and we were told 2 different times the incorrect place and where we should stay for our tour, or staying for our tour. What did we learn? I'm not sure. Mrs. Tips, can you explain what we learned?
So I felt not so smart because I was the one that noticed this for our lovely viewers yesterday, that make sure you don't just come with the paper copy, which I didn't. I had it on my phone. I pulled up the reservation, but it definitely did not have the QR thing. I'm going to blame it on jet lag. That's fine, right? Anyway, we found a very, like Brian said, a very official person in a uniform that said, oh, like, go stand here. Well, that wasn't right either. Then they said, well, go down this street. That wasn't right either. We ended up having to cross the street and go down some stairs to a totally different location. By then it was at least 9:05, maybe more. We were definitely late. We'd missed our window. And it was very strange because we did book through Viator again, which was fine. That wasn't the problem. The problem was just the misdirection, misinstruction, and overall confusion of the way they had things organized. But we found a City Tours, was it, I believe?
Yes, and to be fair, if we would have read the email a little bit more closely, we would have noticed that this Viator tour was hosted by City Tours. So if we would have just read the email a little bit more closely, we might have had better success.
So my overall tip for this in our experience is, if you're provided with an actual address, like a real address of where to meet, not just go find someone with a black flag or a blue shirt. If it gives you an address, put in that address as where you're supposed to meet, because that's exactly what happened. If we had done that, we would have been better off knowing exactly where to go. The lady was super nice. She actually printed off our stuff in her car on her little car printer and allowed us to go in at 10 instead of making us miss it altogether or being crazy late in the day starting. So it did work out, but it was a little bit of a stress point just because we were ready to go and get it done, and we had to stand around and wait.
And that was another nice thing about doing a non-guided tour as opposed to a guided tour, is that it was easier for us to get in at 10 a.m. If we would have had a guided tour, it would have been much more challenging, and we would have had to wait around a little bit later. Plus, we got to save a little bit more money, and we're all about that, of course.
What we also learned is that by doing the guided tours with a tour guide was wonderful, but what we found the theme of the day was they push you through the museum and all of the parts so quickly. I felt like they were almost running from room to room. They hardly ever stopped to really go over things. So it made me question, how much are you really learning, I guess, or how much are you really able to absorb at that pace? And I understand they have so many hours to squeeze it all in, and I know if you do the private, it's crazy expensive. But if I were to do it again, and it sounds like we are because we'll go over why in a minute, but I would still do self-guided, but I would ask for the audio to go and like pick what things I want to learn about.
To be fair though, the tour guides do keep you on time. And they do this by displacing people and pushing people out of the way. How do I know? They did this to Mrs. TFC a few different times. On the positive side though, we got to just hang around and listen to the tour guide speak and save some money because we didn't pay for that. Now, would you pay for a guided tour or would you do a self-guided tour? Let us know in the comments below.
Or if you've done it, did you enjoy either or, and what did you like best about it? Because I would like to go back. The next thing that really stuck with me is it is so big and there is so many people. We actually missed a lot. And I say that because there's just so much to look at.
Are you sure it wasn't because you were just keeping your head down?
I did not keep my head down.
But you saw some cool things when you kept your head down, didn't you?
I did. So that's my other, I will say, shocker maybe, is that I get that everyone looks at the ceilings. Okay, the ceilings are gorgeous. But I happened to look down and the floors were just absolutely breathtaking. Different marbles, different stones, mosaic tiles. And you will randomly come across sections that are roped off like in the middle of the room and you're like, well, what's going on? It's because it's a portrait or artwork done in the tiles of the floor. They're very pretty. So don't always look up. Make sure that you actually look at the floor. We'll have some pictures, obviously, to show you for that. Because it is so big, you miss turns and you kind of get turned around a lot of times and you just kind of go with the crowd. But if you don't go with the crowd and you glance off to the sides, there are other smaller rooms with smaller displays where there was absolutely nobody in there. There was one little sad looking security guard sitting in a chair, but there was often really pretty stuff, beautiful windows where you could get beautiful scenic of the property and pictures with whoever you're with or just of yourself with the beautiful background.
Or Instagram. If I had Instagram, I'd be posting on Instagram. Now, Mrs. TFC, did you break any rules like taking pictures or making loud noises?
No, but let's talk about how annoying that is. So let's talk Sistine Chapel for a sec. Absolutely worth it. Breathtaking. The iconic Michelangelo ceiling is worth every aggravation that we've had along the way. And I still enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound negative about it. But we have to remember it is in a highly sacred place. Ladies, they like your shoulders to be covered. I simply brought the lightweight rain jacket to just throw on my shoulders just to be respectful. Gentlemen, do not wear your hats. Please take them off. And they don't really like shorts, but I think that they kind of let that go. It was more the shoulders and wearing a hat. And they do request that you stay very quiet and respectful. And you obviously cannot take pictures for several reasons. It destroys the art. The flash will ruin it, all the things. We saw people, of course, trying to take pictures. Why? I don't understand why that was so hard for them to understand. And at several points, it got very loud because people's whispers were no longer whispers. Please just don't be that person. Just be respectful.
And then you just hear an announcement that says,
definitely disappointing. And they had like a food court area that was extremely overpriced.
Now the food was disappointing,
The food court area was overpriced, but the little cafe was more reasonable, but just not great quality. So if you can hold off and just go somewhere else.
While we were still tired, we still had other things to do. What do we have to do again? I forgot.
Because you always say it wrong. We wanted to see St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter's Square.
And I was able to lead the way, because you just take a right outside, right around the corner, and take another right and walk for about 10 minutes, and you literally end up right at St. Peter's Square.
It was very vast, like ginormous columns with statues and carvings. It's not at all what I thought it would be. I will say that. It was much more grand and ornate than I had imagined, or it's even better than what you see on TV and things. It was very beautiful. Long line.
Well, that's because it was free. Our Viator ticket said it was free, but it's literally free for everyone.
So we did find out that it is supposed to be, from what we heard, free to enter the Basilica. What they do charge for is if you want to go up into the dome, which I've heard is really cool, but I thought the outside was just as pretty, and from the grounds, you can take in all the grandeur from there if you don't want to pay the extra money. We did not want to stand in line.
And if you don't like waiting in long lines, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so YouTube knows to pass this content on to someone else and other people don't have to wait a long time to learn about tips for cruisers.
One day, we did not go inside. Sorry to disappoint. We can pull some photos online for you, but we ourselves did not go in, but we enjoyed the grounds just as much.
And honestly, this is a very sacred and special place for many, so you might see people worshiping or praying in their own way. So just be respectful and act accordingly.
Yes, I would say, same as the Sistine Chapel, just remember where you're at. It is sacred ground. Please just be respectful of others.
Now, leaving, we decided to go to the castle, and we were only going to go to the castle if we had enough time. So, we decided to go to the castle by the name of...
I'm probably going to say it wrong. Castel Sant'Angelo. But you heard everyone just calling it the castle, so we're going to call it the castle.
Alright, so the castle wasn't too far away. We just plugged it into the offline Google Maps that we downloaded, and it says it was about a 15 to 20 minute walk. So we start taking the walk, which takes you through some neighborhoods, and you get to see locals. And sometimes you stumble across some gems. And this is how we stumbled across our first gem, which was a nice little Italian restaurant named Egg Pasta. And we made an order, but I don't remember what it was. What was it again? I forgot.
We ordered a bowl of bolognese and the secret that we learned from another travel of getting the pepe, which was super good. It's basically just butter and pepper, but for whatever reason, it's absolutely delicious.
They're each only €8 each. Well, technically the latter is $14 if you want it truffle. I didn't really care for truffle, or I'm too thrifty for it, one or the other. But we knew the place had to be good because the prices were cheaper, which means it wasn't a tourist trap charging double the price, which happened even just a couple blocks away that we saw. And we saw locals eating there, including a bunch of kids. And you know, if you see a bunch of kids eating there, it's probably going to be good and it's definitely going to be cheap.
It was a bunch of just clearly after school kids just going there and hanging out. So it was like, well, we're definitely going to eat here. And it was absolutely delicious. So much better than the place we had the night before, which was disappointing. This was like one of those, if I could have just sat there and ate all afternoon, I probably would have. In some of the neighboring streets, there were some beautiful little, what I would consider boutique-y shops and some little touristy looking shops. But there was definitely some what I'll call nicer looking places to go in and look around. They weren't kind of, they weren't hassling you like some of the tourist traps. It was definitely more elegant, like what I had kind of envisioned for Italy. It was very nice.
And honestly, this part was much more enjoyable than the actual castle, which I'll get to in a moment. But we got to see the Italian police in action. As we're walking across the bridge to the castle, we see all these what I would call hustlers. People selling cheap knickknacks, chargers, etc. And this part doesn't bother me, but when they start harassing you and really starting to follow you, then it becomes a nuisance. And while this happens at all the major tourist attractions, this was our first experience it firsthand ourselves.
Yes, I will say one thing that we noticed is at no point at all during this trip did we ever feel unsafe or in any harm or anything like that. We've been fine the whole time, and this really wasn't bad. It was just more of an irritating thing. And this is the only time, like Brian said, where it felt a little just more uncomfortable, but everywhere we've been, they've been wonderful.
Very true, but it was very delightful when I saw the police pull up and I saw the sellers use their perfected getaway to grab their blankets and their doodads and skedaddle. I guess they're not supposed to do this, or they've had some run-ins in the past. And with our focus no longer on the police, we moved on to the castle grounds. And as you walked in to the left, there was this beautiful park and a playground. It was quiet, I could hear Mrs. Tips, well shaded, and great for Instagram. It looked like all the locals were there and no tourists.
Yes, it was really just this beautiful path lined with very large grown trees, lined with park benches. It was a great place to kind of take a breath and just enjoy your environment and enjoy the sounds of the city without having to deal with a lot of crowds. Like, it just was no one there. It was wonderful.
No tourists, but we did want to see some, so we pulled up the offline Google Maps and typed in the Trevi Fountain. Once again, we got to go through some side streets, which was really nice to be immersed in the local culture. I'll let Mrs. Tips tell you about what the journey was like, or you can experience it yourself by clicking on the raw, unedited footage video that I'll have linked in the description for you, which is pretty cool just to sit back and watch and listen to the sounds of the city and the conversation that Mrs. Tips and I had.
So we've utilized the walking instructions through the offline Google Maps basically this whole trip because most everything is extremely walkable. Going through these little neighborhoods, you see all of the beautiful architecture of the buildings, the beautiful doors, the beautiful gates, all of the nice little shops and beautiful little bistros and cafes and restaurants. Absolutely amazing. Had we just taken the normal streets, we would have missed absolutely all of that. I mean, if you took a bus, you missed it all. If you take a taxi, you missed it all. Doing this, we felt like we were truly in Italy as opposed to just sticking to all the main roads and just going to the next attraction. It felt like a real vacation.
Yes, when you get closer, you get more tourist items, and you might pop into a store and see a scarf and everything that is supposedly made in Italy. Mrs. TFC, what happened with the scarf? Did you get our daughter a scarf to bring back as a present?
That was a very irritating experience because I really wanted the scarf, but it was one of those situations where because they've in all likelihood had people come in and steal things, they were very not so stealthily like following us around the store. I'd already picked 2 things I wanted and she was so much in my face. I got so annoyed I left, but we went to another store and I looked really closely at it and it so obviously had a made in China tag on it, even though it was claiming to be made in Italy. And I was like, okay, well, no, not gonna get this anymore. Little disappointing, so just be careful. If it says made in Italy, maybe look for that tag to make sure it really was and not something you can order on Amazon at home.
Yeah, the Coach purse on the side of the road for $100, that's not a real purse. Is that a pro tip? Let's talk Trevi Fountain.
So as you approach the Trevi Fountain, obviously, maybe not obvious, you get more and more people, more and more crowds. The pathway does get a little more clogged. To be expected though, because it is absolutely amazing. Definitely a must. But with that, pack your patience. I say that because I got impatient myself today because it's a pet peeve of mine. If you're going to take a picture at an attraction, take a couple, and then move on out of the way and let someone else take a picture. Not the case at Trevi Fountain.
Yeah, we did find a good spot on the side to get a good picture. That was the best place in our opinion. We happened to get lucky and got one right in the middle as well, which I think it turned out well. Was it a good picture?
I think it came out good. It was surprisingly was almost dead center of the fountain, and I don't know why no one was standing there, but the other thing to be mindful of is everyone wants to throw a coin in. Well, that means everyone is down in that spot. So either be super patient, work your way down there and just work your way in, or just know you might need to come back another time, or just be okay not doing it. I actually did not do it, and I'm okay with it. I've made peace with it, whatever. The other tip that we've heard from someone else is to go at night. Apparently they light it up. It's very beautiful, and there's usually not that many people. We did not want to go back a second time because quite honestly, our feet are killing us today.
It's pretty dark out right now. If we went now, do you think it would be okay?
Can I go in my pajamas?
Okay, no. So we still had a little bit of time left, so we decided to stroll past the Spanish Steps on our way back to the cafe that we ate at yesterday. Yes, it was that good, so we decided to stop by again. And the other nice thing about this place is that it is so close to the Pantheon. Now, yesterday there was no construction going on. Today there's some construction going on. And this is the one place that we didn't buy a ticket for because you can just get a ticket at the kiosk. It's really cheap. It's like €5. So we didn't pre-purchase it. Now, I have heard that there's also a cash line. So if that kiosk line is really long, there's a cash line on the far right. The kiosk is on the far left. We definitely spent a long time at this cafe. We may have had the main course and even the dessert. And we enjoyed that right there on the wall. And when you're sitting on that wall, your back is literally right against or to the Pantheon. So it's that close. Now, another little pro tip here is they have a bathroom there. So go ahead and use that bathroom so you don't have to pay it for a while you're there, because if you're a guest, you don't have to pay for it. What do you think of the cafe?
I really enjoyed the cafe, and I think that my favorite part was really the atmosphere. You have the best view of what I'll call real people, if you want to call it that. I mean, you saw students coming home from school, moms with strollers and their babies just going for a walk. It clearly wasn't all tourists. Yes, you see tourists, but you see a ton of locals just going in for some gelato at the end of the workday. You see businessmen in suits. I mean, it was nice. It was enjoyable to just watch the locals doing their local stuff. One of my favorite things was we just happened to be at the end of the street. There was a street musician playing beautiful music while we were sitting there eating our little snacky dinner, if you want to call it that, cafe dinner. But it was just beautiful. It just closed off the day wonderfully with music and the atmosphere. It was great.
Now be sure to tap or click your screen here to see what Rome Day 1 was like. And of course, share this so you don't have to explain all these good tips to your friend. This is Brian and Mrs. Tips for Tips for Cruisers.